Hello and welcome. Today we dive into the world of alimony, a term often heard but seldom understood. Alimony, in its simplest form, is a payment for the support and maintenance of a spouse or ex-spouse. It can either be made as a lump sum payment or as monthly installments. The primary purpose is to provide financial assistance to a dependent spouse who may not be as financially stable or capable as the other. This supporting spouse, who typically earns more or has more assets, is legally obliged to contribute to the well-being of the dependent spouse. This financial obligation is typically set during a divorce proceeding and is a critical part of the separation process. So, alimony is a crucial element of a divorce, particularly for the spouse who is financially dependent. As we delve deeper into this topic, we'll explore what happens when alimony payments are not made and the legal repercussions that follow. Now, imagine a scenario where the supporting spouse neglects or refuses to pay the court-ordered alimony. What can a dependent spouse do? Well, firstly, it's important to understand that alimony is not a charitable donation. It's a legal obligation, designed to maintain a certain standard of living for the dependent spouse. If this obligation isn't met, there are several avenues that can be pursued to secure the payment. One of the initial steps that a dependent spouse can take is to garnish the supporting spouse's wages. This means that a portion of the supporting spouse's income is directly allocated to meet the alimony payments. It's a powerful tool, and it can be especially useful when dealing with a reluctant payer. However, this process isn't as simple as snapping your fingers. It involves legal procedures, and it's crucial to have a profound understanding of the law or to have a good attorney by your side. You see, in order to garnish the supporting spouse's wages, the dependent spouse needs to be deemed as a creditor. This effectively means that the supporting spouse owes you money, and you have the same rights as any other creditor to recover that debt. But what if garnishing wages isn't enough, or isn't possible? Perhaps the supporting spouse is self-employed or their income is irregular. Well, don't worry. There are other legal remedies available to enforce the payment of alimony. For instance, you can seek enforcement by proceedings for civil contempt. This is essentially a legal process where the court can take action against the supporting spouse for not obeying the court orders. If the supporting spouse continues to neglect their obligation, they may even face criminal contempt, which could lead to imprisonment. So even if alimony isn't paid, there are still avenues to explore to secure the payment. Remember, patience and persistence are key in this process. It may seem daunting, but with the right steps and the right legal advice, you can ensure that the supporting spouse fulfills their obligation. If wage garnishment isn't enough, there are other legal measures that can be taken. One of the most powerful tools at your disposal is enforcement by proceedings for civil contempt. This essentially means that the supporting spouse, who is not meeting their alimony obligations, is in contempt of court. The court, in response, can find ways to ensure that the court's orders are obeyed. It's a potent tool, one that can bring the weight of the law squarely on the shoulders of the supporting spouse. Now, if the supporting spouse continues to ignore the court's orders, there's another legal avenue that can be pursued: punishment for disobedience by proceedings for criminal contempt. Yes, you heard it right, criminal contempt. This is no small matter. This isn't just about a slap on the wrist. We're talking about possible prison time here. The court can request this punishment if the supporting spouse continues to disregard the court's orders. It's important to note that the threat of prison isn't just an empty one. It's a very real possibility if the supporting spouse continues to ignore the court's orders. This isn't about being vindictive or punishing the supporting spouse for the sake of it. It's about ensuring that the dependent spouse, who is entitled to the alimony, receives what they're owed. These legal measures aren't just about getting the supporting spouse to pay up. They're about upholding the law, ensuring justice, and making sure that the dependent spouse isn't left in the lurch. It's about ensuring that the supporting spouse understands the gravity of their obligations and the serious consequences of not fulfilling them. So, if you're dealing with a supporting spouse who isn't paying their court-ordered alimony, know that there are legal measures that can be taken. You're not powerless, and you're not alone. The law is on your side, and there are legal mechanisms in place to help you get what you're owed. These legal measures can be quite persuasive. even leading to prison time for the supporting spouse. Beyond contempt of court, there's another legal path that can be pursued. This path involves obtaining a judgment lien. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is a judgment lien? Well, in simple terms, a judgment lien is a court ruling that gives a creditor the right to take possession of a debtor's real property if the debtor fails to fulfill his or her contractual obligations. So, how does one go about obtaining a judgment lien in the context of unpaid alimony? The process begins with a motion in the cause or a separation action. This is a legal action initiated by the dependent spouse with the help of their attorney to seek the amount owed in alimony as a judgment lien. In other words, the dependent spouse is asking the court to officially recognize that they are owed money by the supporting spouse. Once the court grants this motion, the dependent spouse is deemed a creditor of the supporting spouse. This means that the dependent spouse now has the same rights as any other creditor. The supporting spouse's debt is legally acknowledged, and the dependent spouse can take steps to collect what they are owed. But how is this judgment lien utilized to enforce the alimony judgment? Well, once the judgment lien is secured, the dependent spouse can use the execution sales and supplemental proceedings remedy. This legal remedy allows the dependent spouse to enforce the alimony judgment by initiating a sale of the supporting spouse's personal or real property. That's right, the property of the supporting spouse can be sold to pay the alimony amount owed. This could include anything from their car to their home or other valuable assets. By securing a judgment lien, you can ensure that the supporting spouse's property can be used to fulfill their alimony obligations. It's a powerful tool in the fight to enforce alimony payments, and one that should not be overlooked in your journey to secure what you are rightfully owed. In some cases, the threat of criminal contempt may not be enough, but there's another option. Now, let's delve into the enforcement by proceedings for civil contempt. This is a legal process that can come into play if the supporting spouse, the one obliged to pay alimony, does not respond to the threat of criminal contempt or decides to appeal the decision. Civil contempt is essentially a method used by the court to enforce compliance with its own orders. In the context of alimony, it's a way of saying to the supporting spouse, "Hey, remember that court order you're supposed to be following? You really need to get on that." Let's break it down. When a court issues an order for alimony, it's not merely a suggestion or a friendly advice. It's a legally binding directive. If the supporting spouse disobeys this order, they are, in essence, disrespecting the authority of the court. This is where civil contempt comes into play. Civil contempt proceedings are initiated to compel the supporting spouse to comply with the alimony order. The aim here is not to punish the disobedient party, as in criminal contempt, but rather to ensure that the dependent spouse, the one entitled to receive alimony, gets what they are owed. In the proceedings, the court will make an inquiry into the supporting spouse's ability to pay. If it's found that they can pay, but are simply refusing to, the court may impose certain sanctions. These can range from fines to even imprisonment until the supporting spouse complies with the court's order. Remember, though, the goal of civil contempt is not to punish, but to achieve compliance with the alimony order. If the supporting spouse still refuses to pay, the court may explore other enforcement options, like wage garnishments or property liens. So, civil contempt proceedings can be another tool in your arsenal to secure your alimony. Remember, the aim here is to ensure you, as the dependent spouse, are receiving the financial support you're entitled to. Don't hesitate to use every legal avenue available to you. Non-payment of alimony can lead to serious consequences. When the supporting spouse fails to meet their responsibilities, the law has measures to ensure they face the repercussions of their actions. One of the most severe penalties for non-payment of alimony is imprisonment. Yes, you heard me right. The supporting spouse can indeed end up behind bars for refusing to pay alimony. This severe consequence is usually a result of proceedings for criminal contempt. When the supporting spouse disobeys the court's orders, the court can hold them in contempt and impose punishment, which can include jail time. But remember, this is dependent on a judge's decision. Now, if the threat of jail doesn't get the supporting spouse to cough up the alimony, the dependent spouse can pursue enforcement by proceedings for civil contempt. This is another legal avenue that can compel the supporting spouse to pay up. However, it's important to remember that these legal processes can take time. Patience and persistence are crucial in these situations. It might feel frustrating and even overwhelming at times, but it's essential to keep pushing forward. After all, alimony is not a gift but a right, a means of support that the law recognizes and protects. And let's not forget, non-payment of alimony can lead to other financial consequences for the supporting spouse. For instance, the court can order the transfer of property, or even the sale of personal or real property to cover the alimony arrears. So what does this all mean? The law is not a passive observer in cases of alimony non-payment. It provides multiple avenues to ensure the dependent spouse gets their due, even if it means resorting to actions like property sales, wage garnishments, and even jail time for the supporting spouse. Remember, the law is on your side, and there are numerous consequences for the supporting spouse who refuses to pay. So stay patient, stay persistent, and most importantly, stay informed about your rights and the legal remedies available to you. In all of this, one thing is clear: having the right legal counsel is critical. When navigating the murky waters of alimony disputes, the presence of an experienced attorney can provide much-needed clarity and direction. This is a complex legal landscape, riddled with intricate laws and regulations. It's like trying to find your way through a labyrinth blindfolded. Trying to tackle this alone can be overwhelming, not to mention risky. That's where an attorney comes in. They are your guide, your advocate, and your advisor. They know the law inside out and can steer you through the legal maze. Whether it's garnishing wages, obtaining a judgment lien, or enforcing an alimony judgment, a good attorney can ensure that the legal process is handled correctly and your rights are protected. Think of it this way: a proficient attorney is like a seasoned ship captain navigating through a storm. They are experienced, they know the route, and they understand how to handle the ship to keep you safe. Without them, you're left to weather the storm alone. Moreover, an attorney can also help you understand the potential consequences of non-payment of alimony. They can explain what each step in the legal process entails, what it means for you, and what options you have. They can also help you prepare for what's to come, ensuring that you're not blindsided by any surprises. And let's not forget the emotional support an attorney can provide. Dealing with alimony disputes can be stressful, to say the least. Having someone who understands the legal aspects and can provide objective advice can make a significant difference. So, whether you're a dependent spouse seeking your rightful alimony or a supporting spouse trying to understand your obligations, don't underestimate the importance of good legal counsel. It can mean the difference between a smooth sailing and a rough ride. With the right legal representation, you can ensure that your rights and interests are protected. Alimony is more than just a financial obligation. It's a commitment made during divorce proceedings. It's a promise to support and maintain a dependent spouse, a commitment that should be honored. But what happens when it's not? We've explored that today, shedding light on the options available to you in the event of non-payment. We've discussed garnishing the supporting spouse's wages, a measure that can be taken to ensure you, as the dependent spouse, get what you're due. We've also touched on the potential for proceedings for civil contempt, a route that can be taken when the supporting spouse fails to adhere to the court's orders. In more severe cases, we've looked into the possibility of punishment by proceedings for criminal contempt. Yes, it's as serious as it sounds. A supporting spouse can be sent to prison for failing to fulfill their alimony obligations. We've also explored the avenue of obtaining a judgment lien, a powerful tool that can lead to the sale of the supporting spouse's personal or real property to cover the alimony amount owed. And remember, if arrears accumulate, the court can order property transfers to cover the outstanding amount. In this journey, we have underscored the importance of legal counsel. The right attorney can guide you through the maze of divorce and alimony, ensuring your rights are protected and your needs are met. We've also highlighted the consequences for the supporting spouse if they fail to pay alimony. From legal repercussions to potential imprisonment, the stakes are high. And finally, we've touched on the circumstances that could lead to the cessation of alimony, including the death of either spouse, remarriage of the dependent spouse, or resumption of the marital relationship. Remember, in the complex world of divorce and alimony, knowledge is power. Stay informed, stay persistent, and most importantly, seek professional legal advice when needed.